Bisa
Iya,
diping,
Mas.
Pak. Ya, biar ya, biar dia di layarnya. Jangan saya ya. Saya-
Yeah, yeah. Good evening, Mr. Rob. I think it is evening in the USA.
Here
Thank you
it is.
very much. Thank you very much for giving your time to deliver a general lecture for us in here. Hello, morning.
Bisa di-mute nggak ya? Supaya yang lainnya ya. Hey Rob, good evening. Halo. Go ahead.
Hello.
Eh, Mohon juga buat teman-teman yang lain untuk bisa menyalakan kamera dan mikrofonnya mohon di mute ya untuk menghindari
Can we
gangguan.
mute Pak Rasmi? Noisy. Yeah. Can mute all the participant. Thank you. That's better.
Mhm. Okay, I will continue for this. Thank you for attending this general lecture for all the cadet and maybe staff from the Aviation Polytechnic of Makassar and also the from API Banyuwangi. And we have an amazing speaker here from the Boeing. It's a Mr. Rob Dangerfield. Good evening, sir. So today is our third general lecture with the topic of the Boeing airplane product family. And please do ensure you turn on your camera and also please do mute also your microphone so to avoid the disturbance whilst our speaker giving a lecture. Uh, the first thing I would like to introduce you with the Mr. Rob. I will uh, read his bio. So, Mr. Rob is a graduate from the Utah University. He got like a BSc from it, from the economic and finance, and he do like a he also after graduate he going for the publication design and production in Utah State University for 4 years and 6 months, and he started his career also into the uh, carrier and rocket manufacture at Orbital ATK, no part of Northrop Grumman, supporting the execution of NASA defense and other government program. After that, he joined into the Boeing company from July 2015 as a financial analyst, and in March 2019, he became a marketing regional director for Boeing until now. So thank you very much. Also he is a aviation enthusiast that grew up flying on DC-9 and 727. So you are also a pilot, Mr. Rob. Thank you very much. So I think it's already 10 in the morning. So to shorten the time and we can going on for the lecture itself. For Mr. Rob, you can begin and the Zoom is yours. Thank you very much. Uh, I'm sorry, like, are you able to share your screen or
I
no?
think you double mute, Rob. We cannot hear you. Sebentar, Pak Rasi. Sepertinya beliau sedang
Oke, Bu.
bisa bahasa Jawa ya, Pak ya?
Istri saya orang Jawa, Bu.
Oh, di mana?
Di Prambanan, nggih.
Oh, deket ya, tetangga. Rob, are you okay? We cannot hear you. Okay, can you say? Yeah, go ahead. We still cannot hear you.
Yeah, we still cannot hear you.
Kalau misal ada satu sih, Mbak. Menu kayaknya udah deh.
Oh, I'm sorry, I will unmute it.
Bisa di-unmute nggak, Pak Rasi?
All right. Now can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, I can hear you. Thank you.
finally.
Okay.
We can.
Finally.
All right. Good deal. Let me just share here. Okay. Can you all see that?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
we
can.
can see that.
Okay, great. Okay, cool. Well, thank you everyone for having me here today. It's been a really cool experience to be able to talk to you all tonight, or I guess today for you. So I'm Rob Dangerfield with product marketing in Boeing Commercial Airplanes. And what I do basically is I go and talk to airlines essentially about all of our products and how they can help them really make their airline their best possible operation, how our Boeing airplanes can ensure that their airline is going to have a lot of success. And so myself, I meant to say I'm not a pilot, but I do love aviation and aerospace, and I just love talking about this kind of thing to everyone. And so the fact that I get to do that on a daily basis makes me very happy. So happy to share it here with you all, and excited to get into this. So before I get into Boeing products currently as a whole, I actually want to talk about a few things, mainly where we all started. Boeing is quite an old company. We've been around for over 100 years. So we have over a century of this airplane building experience. And it's been such a great opportunity to see the progression of our airplanes through all of those years. You can see this picture here. We started in a barn, essentially, just one single building way back in the early 1900s. That's where everything started. And our very first airplane, you can see there on the left, the BMW Model 1, 1916. Back in those years, every airplane essentially looks very similar to that, a far cry of what we have today. Now, we progressed in those early years. About 2 decades later, we see the airplane in the center of the picture, the 314 Clipper. That was, if you can see or tell by the shape of it, that is actually a flying boat. So that airplane lands and takes off on the water. Because back in those days, you know, airports really weren't that common on the ground. So a lot of airplanes actually used waterways because that was that's how passengers got around. They rode boats. We then progressed there to the right photo, the 377 Stratocruiser. It came out just after World War II in 1949. And that was like a hard, like full passenger carrier. Now, these airplanes that you see here were fairly popular, but they weren't really what Boeing did the best. Boeing really didn't carry a lot of passenger traffic simply because there wasn't a lot of passenger traffic back then. And so after the 1940s, when we came into the 50s, we came into what's called the jet age. So when jet engines came to be and started carrying passengers, that's when Boeing, I would say, really put itself on the map of the world to say, like, this is what we can do. This is what we can do in aviation. So this airplane you see here, this is the 707. This was the very first jet airplane that Boeing produced for airlines to use in their flights. It was the world's first successful jet transport airplane. So it offered a significantly more and better experience for passengers because it flew higher, it flew much faster, much more comfortable of a ride, and it opened up flying up to more people because it's able to do that. Now, as we move through the early years of the jet age, so this is the 1950s, the 1960s, we got more iconic Boeing airplanes. We got Boeing airplanes like this one you see here. This was a 727. As you can see, it has 3 engines there in the back, 1, 2, and the third one. So that was one configuration that we messed around with. And then, of course, in the late 1960s and early 70s, we had the 747, the Queen of the Skies, as it's known as. Now, most of you will probably recognize this airplane because it is a very iconic airplane with its design, with its double-decker here. So these airplanes kind of wrote Boeing's history and really set it up to be the company that it is today as one of the only 2 airplane manufacturers in the world. So it started from humble roots in just a single building and a single barn, and it's grown now into a very large worldwide company that produces airplanes for the masses. So that leads us to today. This is where Boeing is today. You see in this photo, this is one of our production factories in Everett, Washington. If you ever get a chance to visit Seattle, you can take a public tour of this factory. It's the largest building in the world by volume. And so this is where a lot of our larger airplanes are produced, things like you'll see in a few minutes. But it's just an interesting and fascinating journey that we've been on from our early designs to our modern jets. So what exactly is Boeing producing today? What do I, as a product marketer, what do I go and talk to airlines about? Well, it's really down to just 3 airplanes that can fill the needs of the airlines. So the 737, this is our smallest airplane. This is what, well, typically most people in their lives will have flown if they're flying just very short distances. We have our 777X. This is our largest airplane that we produce, and it's more catered to the long haul, carrying a lot of passengers a really far distance. And then lastly, our 787 Dreamliner. That one is right in the middle of the two. It's bigger than the 737, but smaller than the 777X, but can still carry people a long ways. So with these 3 airplanes, you want to make sure airlines are going to be able to be successful in their operation, no matter what they need. So we want to make sure that every airline has a choice of an airplane to do what they need it. So you're going to hear me say family a lot, because when we build our airplanes, we don't just build them just one airplane, then another, then another. We build them out to be a family, to have the same airplane but at different sizes, and that's to enable airlines to have the ability to do whatever it is they need in their operation. A lot of that is dependent on how much money they can make, because airlines are a business and they're in it to make money, to maximize their revenue generation. So when we design airplanes, we want to make sure that airlines have the opportunity to do so. We also want to make sure that they can have real network coverage. So everywhere that they want to fly, we want to make sure we produce an airplane that will allow them to do so. We also want to make sure that we can win on cost and reliability. So we want to make sure that we're not going to be having airplanes that cost a lot to operate. We want to make sure those are very low. And we also want to make sure our airplanes are super reliable. And what that means is that any of you who've flown may have experienced a delay before because of an airplane problem. We at Boeing want to make sure that nobody has to experience that, or very little amount of people will experience that. So we build our airplanes to be super reliable, so to make delays very, very small. And we want to make sure that passengers, the people who are actually flying in these airplanes, have a good, solid experience. We want to equate the flying in an airplane with flying like outside by yourself like a bird or a superhero. And then lastly, we want to fully embrace our role in climate impact. We want to make sure that all of our airplanes are being produced or manufactured sustainably, and then operate with the lowest possible emissions to lower our overall climate impact. So you're going to see a lot of these different formulas baked into all of our products that we'll go through today. Now, just to give everyone a sense of the aviation, the commercial aviation market that we play in, it's really just 2 manufacturers, 2 major manufacturers of airplanes, Boeing, and then I'm sure you've heard of Airbus. This is what we call a duopoly, where only 2 manufacturers exist in the larger pool. Now, there are other companies that manufacture airplanes, but they're much smaller and they don't produce nearly as many. So here on this chart, you see the size of the airplane. So in the middle there, you can see 2-class seating. So that just means first class, economy class, and how many seats can each plane fit. So the ones on the bottom, those are the smaller ones, the 737 right here. all the way up to the larger 777s that are going to be carrying up to 450 or so passengers. So this is what I mean when I talk about we want to make sure airlines have an airplane for every single one of their needs. We want to make sure that they're getting all of their needs met. And we'll talk about each one of these later. Now, this chart you can see, this is a chart on the y-axis. You see the same seating, but then you also see on the x-axis, you see range. So this is how far airplanes can fly. And you'll notice some of these smaller airplanes will be shorter ranges, and that is exactly by design, because this is for carrying smaller amounts of people over smaller distances. The larger ones here, you can see their ranges they're flying much further and carrying much more people. So always going back to, we're delivering airplanes, giving airlines options to enable their own network profitability. Now, every airplane we make is based on these three pillars. We want to have innovative products, so the latest technology baked in to make them the most efficient machines in the sky. We want to make sure that passengers remember their experiences with the brand, because a passenger can fly on an airline and have a really, really good experience and say, I love that so much, I'm going to come back for more. And they likewise can also have a bad experience that can prevent them from coming back. So we want to make sure that every passenger has an enjoyable journey. And then lastly, aviation is a business. We want to make sure airlines are using our product to maximize their profit potential. So let's go through the three products that we have. Remember, there's the 737 MAX, the 787 Dreamliner, and the 777X. So first, the 737 MAX, we call it, I guess really aviation calls it the industry workhorse. And workhorse just means it's the airplane that will fly many, many, many times a day, all over the world at all different stage lengths. It's the most versatile airplane of the bunch, and this is by far the most popular airplane that we produce and we build the most of. And you can see how popular it is from this chart. You can see all those lines represent different routes that the 737 does. So if any of you have flown on an airplane before, it is very, very likely a 737. They're all over Indonesia, they're all over Southeast Asia, they're really everywhere in the world. So over the course of many decades, we've flown over 32 billion passengers, and we're still counting. You can see on this next world chart, this is how many airline customers and air cargo operators also operate the 737. You can see it's across every continent, every demographic, every business model. The airplane is so versatile, it really can fill the need of so many different airlines. So that's one of the reasons it's our most popular. So let's meet the actual family. Remember, family. Every airplane that Boeing produces is in a family. And here are the four members of the 737 MAX. So you can see there's four of them, but the real major difference between all four of them is just size or fuselage length. Remember, the fuselage is the point here, what carries the people, essentially. And so if you want a very, very small carrier, you're not needing a lot of passengers, but maybe you want to go a little bit further, you get the 737-7. Or if you have a very, very popular route, you go for the 737-10, which will carry a lot more passengers. And then the 8 and the 9 in between. So this is why we do families, to enable airlines to always be able to get the airplane that's right for them. Now, another reason we do families is commonality. So commonality means all of the airplanes are essentially the same from an operational standpoint. Whether you fly the 737-10 up here with 204 seats, or you fly the 737-7 down here with 153 seats. You're going to have the same pilot pool, the same maintenance, the same type rating, same engines, your spares, your cabin crew, your training, all of that is going to be identical to every airplane. So this enables airlines to say, well, you know, we have a 377, but we are now getting more demand than that airplane can carry. So we want to upgauge to a 737-8. And the nice thing is, nothing else changes in your operation. All of these things to run and fly and operate the airplane stay the same. That's one of the beauties of having an airplane family. And this you'll see is replicated across all of our airplanes. So let's go into what makes the MAX technologically advanced. So a few big things. So the 737 MAX is the latest version of the 737. So from the prior version, we've been able to increase its fuel consumption, increase its fuel efficiency by 20%. Now, a big part of that is the LEAP 1B engine. That is the engine that powers the 737 from a company called CFM. And then we have more aerodynamic improvements. We have these winglets that we put on here, which are make the plane more aerodynamic and more fuel efficient, as well as a more aerodynamic shape of the end of the fuselage in the tail cone. And then we have introduced a number of other new technologies to this airplane to bring it into the modern space. So every time when we're going and looking at what's next, what do we need to do now, what is the thing that's going to make airlines more successful, as we look at things like this and how to further better our products. So every 737 MAX has what we called the Boeing Sky Interior. So as you can see from this picture here, it's really made to welcome passengers, get them more in a sense of spacious environment and having just an overall comfortable and enjoyable flight. We do that with a few different things. You can see these bins, they're called pivot bins. They fold down when they're open and they push up and out of the way when closed, giving you that sense of more space in the cabin. We have these called dynamic LED lights. They're used to mimic scenes of nature outside to truly connect our passengers to the sky. Because remember, we want to have our airlines have a premier brand. We want airlines to be proud of what they're introducing their passengers to. And one of the ways that we can do that is designing a cabin that will meet those requirements. Now, when it comes to range, we at Boeing like to talk about these things called circle charts. Now, what a circle chart is, as you can see here, you pick up one point on the map, in this case, Jakarta, and then your airplanes will then make a circle around that point, and that basically tells them how far that airplane can fly from point. So in this case, if you're starting in Jakarta, so you're taking off from Jakarta Airport, on the 737, you can go as far as Tokyo or even Dubai with our longest range airplane, or you can just go as short as Perth or Manila or Ho Chi Minh. So this shows, again, the versatility of the family. It's like, what do you need to actually complete? What do you need to actually be successful as an airline? The 737, remember, is our smallest airplane. And you can still cover essentially all of Southeast Asia, Oceania, and even some of the Middle East. So you'll see more charts like this, but this is one of the main things we use when we talk to airlines about the capability of the airplane. We talk about how many passengers it can carry and how far it can carry them. So this is one that if you were working at an airline, you'd see, and Boeing or Airbus essentially, would come in and they would show you charts like this. So to sum up on the MAX, really it's all about the three things you see here. Remember the three pillars: innovative airplanes, premier brands, and profitable airlines. We mix and make sure these are our formula for success. Make sure it has the technology, has the passenger aspect, and has the ability to make sure all airlines will be profitable by operating it. Okay, our next airplane, so that's those 37 MAX. Our next airplane we're going to talk about is the one that's the one that's bigger than that. This is our 787. Now, I'll make a distinction. The 737 is called what we in the industry call a single aisle. So it means it's just got one aisle down the middle, seats on both sides. The next two airplanes that I'm going to talk about are known as twin aisle. So those are two aisles with seats. So twin aisles are larger, they carry more people, and they fly much further. So we're going to see that exactly with this 787. So the 787, we talk about it being a opening new horizons. That's just a fancy way of saying it opens new routes. You can see on this chart here, all these lines, these are new routes that airlines could now profitably operate because of the 787. Now, some of these routes weren't technologically impossible with prior generation aircraft. They just weren't economical. They weren't profitable because either they were too big to carry all the passengers. They could get the distance, but they didn't need to carry as many. Or they were too small and they couldn't carry a large amount of passengers far enough. The 787 makes those routes now possible. So just to give some examples of routes that would be more applicable to a 787, ones that are flying right now into Jakarta. You have one from Doha in Qatar, flying from Doha to Jakarta. You have one from Abu Dhabi going to Jakarta. So you have these direct links from the Middle East. Now, in prior years, you have to connect through another airport to then get to your destination because that's what made the most sense. But the 787 is what we call a point-to-point airplane. When it doesn't have to go from giant city to giant city. It can just go from mid-sized city to mid-sized city because it's not as big as the airplanes, but it can still go as far. The 787 is also a very popular airplane, similar to the MAX. You can see it's on, again, pretty much every continent, operated by a wide array of airline customers. And now what's also interesting is that, remember, there's three variants. There's three members of this airplane family, the 8, the 9, and the 10. And so this chart shows all the airlines that operate each variant. And where these circles intersect, it means they operate both variants, or even some of these here, they operate all three. So you can see them really utilizing the advantage of having an airplane family by having multiple versions of the airplane in their fleet. So the airplane family is these three, similar to the 737 MAX, where it is three different sizes of airplane, from the smallest to the 8 to the largest to the 10. And depending on what the airline needs, that's how they decide which one to go with. So the 787-8, our smallest one, will carry the least amount of passengers but can go really far. The 787-10 will carry the most amount of passengers but won't fly as far, so you don't need to use it on the same route, all dependent on what you need. And same as the 737, the 787 is very, very common. The same pilots, the same cabin crew, the same mechanics. It's all very, very, very similar. That's the power of a family and power of commonality. So I do like to talk about the technology of the Dreamliner because it is a very, very unique airplane. Now, most airplanes that you'll fly in are made of aluminum. That's been the metal of choice for long, long time, decades and decades, ever since the dawn of the jet age. This airplane, however, is made out of something different. It's made of carbon fiber composite. The entire fuselage, pretty much everything you see on the external, the fuselage, the empennage, which is the tail section, the wings, even the engine nacelles or engine coverings, those are all carbon fiber composite. It is not aluminum. So there are a few benefits to carbon fiber over aluminum. One, it's lighter and it can be much stronger in a lot of situations. And so we set out to build an airplane that's structurally about 50% carbon fiber composite. So that's the biggest difference between this airplane and other two that we're talking about, and essentially almost every other airplane that's flying right now. So this was an airplane that was debuted in 2011. So it's been around for a while, but it's still a very state-of-the-art airplane. It's advanced aerodynamics and some of the most fuel-efficient engines. And we, of course, love the cabin, as we saw on the 737 MAX. No different on the 787. But with the 787, we got to do a lot of unique things. We had to introduce things that passengers may not see, but they can feel, like cleaner air, more humidity, a little lower cabin altitude. All of these things contribute to a much better passenger experience. And remember, the 787 is a long-haul airplane. We're talking 12, 13, 14-hour flights. There's a 787 that goes from London to Perth, Australia, one of the longest flights in the world currently. And so having subtle differences like this may not sound like a lot, but it definitely makes a difference over that time. And here we have the range chart or circle chart for the 787s. Again, started in Jakarta. Now you see like how far this airplane can actually fly. Your scope is gigantic. You essentially have all of Asia, all of Africa, all of Europe. You can even start breaking into North America with this airplane, depending on the variant that you select. So now suddenly with this airplane, you're open to the entire world. And that's kind of the beauty of this airplane, because you don't have to have much people. Just like our 787-9, probably our hottest seller actually, you're taking less than 300 people, but you can take them from Jakarta all the way to Los Angeles or all the way to Cape Town, really kind of anywhere. And so depending on your airline, you have that kind of capability, and it has been a wild success for us. So that's the 787 in a nutshell. We want to make sure we have a technologically advanced airplane that gives us more fuel efficient. We want to make sure we have an airplane cabin that passengers will feel and remember on those long haul flights. And we want to make sure we have a profitable family that enables airlines to utilize the best model for their needs. Okay, that's the 787. Our last passenger airplane is the 777X. Now, it's called the 777X because there is a current 777. The current 777 model has been in production for about 30 years now. And so this airplane, the 777X, this is the next version of that airplane. It's brand new, and it actually will debut next year in service. And so this airplane is our largest airplane that we currently produce right now. It's the largest twin engine, so only two engine airplane in the entire world right now. And this is for carrying a whole lot of people really far distances. If you remember one of the first airplanes that I showed, the 747, the giant double-decker two-level airplane with four engines, that was iconic in the 1970s. And enabled passengers to go super, super far and carry, like 500 people. Well, we don't build that airplane anymore, but this airplane can take a lot of the same routes that airplane did, but set with so much more efficiency. And that's one of the factors that enabled this airplane to be successful. So we've gotten a lot of popularity, a lot of orders with this one too, from some of the world's largest airlines that operate, and it continues to build. So just like our other airplanes, the 777X is also a family. We have the smaller version, which is the -8. This is it's similar, I'll say, in size to our current 777 that's been in production for a while. And the 777-9 is really in a class of its own as the largest twin engine airplane flying. So it really just depends. Do you need all the capacity of a 777-9, or do you want the smaller capacity to replace your 777-300ERs, which is the current 777 right now? The decision is up to the airline based on their needs. Now, some of the really cool technology that we put into the 777X actually grew from things we had on the original 777 and the 787. So we were able to combine a lot of those things together and get the best of both worlds with the 777X. Now, one thing that you'll see in this picture that looks a little different than any other airplane that we've built before, these things on the end. So these are not winglets like you see a lot of airplanes have, which are fuel consumption reduction devices. No, these are actual wingtips that fold down when they're in flight and fold up when it's parked. Now you're probably wondering, why would we ever do that? We've never done that before on a passenger airplane. But the key word is all about efficiency. We gave the 777X a brand new wing. The 777 had a pretty good aluminum wing, but the 777X, the new version, we gave it a brand new carbon fiber composite wing, and we made it much longer. So we increased the span, which means we increased the aspect ratio, which means we increased the efficiency of the wing. So this airplane will fly much more efficiently than its predecessor, purely on the aerodynamics of the wing. Now, of course, new engines help a lot too, but I want to make sure that it's very, very apparent. The 777X wing is very, very next generation. So the reason we put the fold, though, because if we have a super long wing, we're now restricted to gates that we can go to as a passenger airplane. So we wanted the 777X to fit into the same gates as the original 777. So with the wingtips folded up like this, the exact same span as this airplane. So folds it up when it parks at the gate, and then before it takes off, it folds back down. And that's why we have that folding wingtip. Some other things that we introduced on the 777X, the brand new engine from GE, it's called the GE9X, the largest commercial jet engine in the entire world. We're talking, like 12 feet in diameter. It's insane to see up close. If you ever get to see it up close, I hope you do, because it is a marvel to look at. And we just introduced a few other aerodynamic aspects to this airplane to make it very, very efficient. And of course, we had to update or go all out on the interior because we also design interior cabins to airplanes. So we did a lot on the 787 when it came to passenger research and basing our designs off findings of those research to really get into what passengers can expect and what they should need in an airplane. We took that to the next level on the 777X to really make it an unforgettable experience. We also wanted to make sure airlines could have the choice to play around with the entire structure. So you can actually customize your own ceiling structure, whether it's on the left side and you see it's called the ceiling A for above, where the ceiling panels go above and over the center line bins to give you a sense of height, or the B ceiling, which has the ceiling panels go up and above the outboard bins to give you a sense of width. Now, we did that because in our research that we found physical space in an airplane can't really change, but the sense of spaciousness, so psychologically, a passenger's sense of spaciousness can change with simple things like this. So it gives airlines the opportunity to configure their cabins, whether it's economy or whether it's first class or business class. They can put in all sorts of different combinations. So we included a lot of the same things in the cabin from the 787 to make sure you have a very, very enjoyable flight. So a lot of that things, though, the things that you can't see but you can feel, we incorporated them to the 777X. All right, here's time for the circle chart for the 777X. Lots of people. We were talking about 395 to 426 people over a very, very long distance. Now from Jakarta, we can go all the way to like Midwest or like the middle of North America. And then of course, all the way, you can even reach the southern tip of South America. Our 777-8 is our longest range airplane that we will have. But if you want just to carry more passengers, don't necessarily need the range of that one, you choose the 777-9. Now, another key aspect of the 777 and actually all of our airplanes is sustainability. So how do we lessen our climate impact and maybe actually our carbon footprint with these airplanes? Well, the 777X, as I've said, is very, very efficient, so much more efficient than the airplanes it's replacing and comparable airplanes. So you can see here on all the major emissions like carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide, those are the two like most harmful emissions that aviation emits. The 777X is the lowest producer of those of airplanes in its class. It also is very, very quiet. So even though noise is not an emission specifically, is also very, very important when it comes to regulations. So really the 777X, we have innovative features that enable you to operate at a very, very low cost. We have a cabin experience that your passengers will never forget. And we of course have a profitable family for you to choose the best way to operate your airline. Okay. So that is the end of the passenger airplanes. Now, that's what most people know Boeing commercial airplanes for because they fly on them. But Boeing also produces a family of freighters. So the biggest difference between freighters and passenger airplanes, well, they look very similar, as you can see here. But there's no windows. That's how you can tell instantly a freighter from a passenger one, is that there's lack of windows because boxes don't need to see all the cool things outside. Now, when it comes to air freight on the global scale, air freight is not a large portion of that. Really, only about 1% of all air freight is flown by airplane. But it's 35% of the value because in some instances, air freight is your only option. Think about Formula One, for instance. If you have a race in Singapore one week and you got to get to Dubai the next week for a race, the only way you're going to get there and all of your equipment and all your car and everything is by air freight. Now, Boeing has been in the freighter market for a long, long time too. Actually, our very first airplane, again, this BMW, this Model 1, that was built to carry mail. And then this one was also meant to carry mail, specifically because that was the high prized cargo of the day. And as Boeing entered the jet age, we built freighters into our other passenger airplane standard. So we had the 707 freighter here, our 747 freighter here, and of course our 777 freighter. Now it's a similar lineup, but instead of seats down the middle here, it's how much can you carry from a metric tons. From our smallest freighter at 24 metric tons, all the way to our largest freighter, 777-8F, which is 118 metric tons. Now, in this space, and specifically the freighter space, it's pretty dominant from Boeing so far. Now, Airbus is starting to gain a little share, and they've actually introduced a new freighter to compete with us, which we welcome the competition. But currently today, most air freight flies on the Boeing freighter. Now, I'm just going to talk about our newest Boeing freighter, the 777-8F. So the last airplane I talked about was the 777X. This airplane, the 777-8F, is the freighter version of that airplane. So it has all of the same benefits, the large span wing, the folding wingtip, all the new engines, all the advanced designs. It has connectivity to track your cargo. All the latest tech now brings to this freighter. So that's really what's on, like, in line. That's what's coming next for us to really get into like the next freighter space, to replace a lot of the older large freighters. Carries a lot of things, a lot of weight, especially 118 metric tons, nothing to write home about, nothing to cheese off at. And then of course, enables you to be more fuel efficient, more sustainable, and more profitable overall. So I want to touch a little bit more on sustainability and how we are committed to reducing our climate impact as much as possible. One of the biggest ways that we do that is through fleet renewal, meaning we make new airplanes and make them much, much more efficient, therefore less emissions, and less emissions when you actually manufacture the aircraft to the ones that they replace. You can see on this chart that every airplane we currently offer, from the 37 MAX all the way to the 777-8F freighter, they are anywhere from 20 to 60% better in either emissions or noise reductions compared to the airplanes that they are replacing. And that's one of the biggest ways that we're going to reduce our impact, because we forecasted there's going to be a need for thousands and thousands of more airplanes over the next 20 years. So if we can replace them or use more efficient airplanes to fill those orders, then that's going to be very, very much better for our climate impact. Now, we always are innovating. And one of the ways we do that from a sustainable perspective is we test a lot of new technologies on this airplane called the Eco Demonstrator. So this is an airplane, a 777, that we fly around and test new technologies. Things like sustainable aviation fuel, things like more recyclable and reusable interior components, all of these different things to help test technologies that can be applied to future products to be more sustainable overall in every little way. Because for us, there's no small thing that we can do. Everything that we do when it comes to sustainability is going to be a benefit. One of the biggest things that we're doing is that we partnered with NASA, which is the National Aeronautics and Space Administration here in the US, to come up with a demonstrator of a very different looking airplane. This is a proof of concept we want to try called a truss brace wing. You can see here's a truss brace right here. Most airplanes only have a single mono wing, but with a long, super long thunder wing like this, you brace it like that, and that can help reduce emissions by up to 30% because the wing is so much more efficient. Now, we're doing this on a very much a test scale. So we want to make sure, is this feasible or not? Is this feasible not only to fly, but to operate as an airline, to build, all those different things. So we've been theorizing about this for a long time, and now we're actually going to build a full-scale demonstrative airplane to see what is feasible, what is next in the next great era of aviation. So that's really the Boeing kind of mission. We want to make sure that everybody, all airlines everywhere, have the best airplanes that they'll be able to operate to the most efficient use of their network. We want to make sure they can carry all the people as far as they need to. We want to make sure that they have the most advanced technology on their airplanes. We want to make sure that they are always the most reliable. We don't want to have any delays, as little as possible. We want to make sure that every airline is going to be a successful business, a successful operation, because they're operating Boeing airplanes. That's really our mission. And that's what I go and talk to airlines about, is about mainly these three airplanes you see here, and how they can make that reality happen for all airlines everywhere. Okay, Well, that is about it from me. And so I'll turn it back over.
Thank you very much, Rob, for your really interesting talk about the Boeing product family. So we come up with the question and answer session. So for this session, I would like to invite all the participants. If you have any question about that, please raise your hand and we'll let you speak for that. Jadi kalau ada pertanyaan dari taruna-taruni, boleh angkat tangannya, raise your hand. Rob,
Yep.
I actually have one question for you.
Okay, sure.
If you
Yeah,
don't
go ahead.
mind.
Yeah, of
Like
course.
you talk about the family product of the Boeing aircraft, and I just wondering how long it takes to develop a new family like a 777X up from the scratch from the research itself until into the market. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say it actually depends on the airplane. And I'll give you a few examples. So that iconic airplane, my personal favorite, the 747, that was developed in a very short amount of time, only like a couple of years. Now we go as airplanes got more complicated and more complex, they became, I'd say, longer developmental time. So like the 787, our newest airplane that has entered service, it was about 8 years or so from launch to say, hey, we're developing this new airplane, to when it then entered service with an airline. So they can take anywhere, depending on the airplane, from 5 to 10 years usually.
Okay. Oh yeah. And one quick question again, Rob, for me,
Yeah.
uh, I know a certain aircraft has a certain engine type, and an engine manufacturer it can be from the GA, from the Rolls-Royce,
Yep.
when the Boeing decided to match the aircraft with the engine, what other consideration beside it the compatibility, or did you build it together from the scratch from, or you can just choose whatever engine that have already in the market or something like that, the compatibility? Because I know one type of the aircraft, it has a different brand of the engine manufacturer, but still the same aircraft type.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, it depends on the airplane. So I'll give a few examples. So the 787, the Dreamliner, that has a choice of 2 different engines, kind of like what you mentioned. There's the GE NX engine or the Rolls-Royce Trent 1000 engine. So when we were developing the 787, we basically went out to the engine manufacturers like GE and Rolls-Royce and said, hey, we're building an airplane that we need this amount of thrust capability, we need this amount of performance, this amount of weight, this amount of size, like everything like that. And usually the engine manufacturer will respond with proposals on that kind of thing. Now, sometimes engine manufacturers will kind of develop new engines on their own. For example, CFM, they're the ones that supply the engines to our 737 MAX, but they also supply engines to the A320 family as well. And so both airplanes are utilizing the same engine. So there are a lot of considerations that go into it. So sometimes the engine and the airplane are tied together from the beginning. For instance, the 777X, the engine for that airplane is the GE9X, and that was really developed specifically and only for the 777X. So those two like go hand in hand. But like an engine like the CFM LEAP engine, that was just developed for any narrow body operator that wanted to use it. So we have the A320 using a version, the 737 using a version, even the Comac C919 using a version of that engine.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob. I would not.
Yep.
I will give like the opportunity for the others to ask a question. Is there any question from the cadets? Yeah, you can please do raise your hand and I can let you speak for that.
Yeah, Pak Rasi, maybe our student can ask question with Bahasa Indonesia, and we can
Oh yeah,
translate.
yeah.
Don't be
That's
afraid,
that.
just ask question in any languages, and don't worry, Rob, we're going to translate for you. Thank you.
Great.
Silakan student, kalau ada pertanyaan apa saja untuk Pak Rob.
Ya, jangan takut atau malu-malu, tanya aja bahasa Indonesia nggak apa-apa.
So Rob, last week when we have the lecture with the Miss Shannon, and one of the student asked how Boeing can compete with others, and what actually Boeing does to make the airplane better. That's the question from last week. Go ahead.
Yeah. That's a great question, and that's honestly what I spend the most time doing, because when we're in a sales campaign with an airline, like we know we only have one competitor, it's Airbus. And so we have to craft our story to fit that airline's needs, because when you weigh the airplanes like in just generally one with the other, they're very, very similar. I do admit that Airbus does build a very, very competitive product. So it all comes down to the fine details. Remember, like I said about airplane families, commonality, and tailoring the airplane to exactly the airline's needs. That's where we can find the differences, because all airlines are looking for different things. Some want to fly a plane from London to Perth. Some people want to fly a plane from Jakarta to Manila. And so there's differences that we can exploit there. And whether it's a small operation or large operation, we put our airplane in the best light in their specific one. So a lot of the things that we'll go into showing is our maintenance cost advantages and our aerodynamic supremacy in a lot of different areas, and our fuel efficiency, and some of the airplanes can seat more. Now, every airline doesn't want all those things, so we're always tailoring our story for the individual airplanes. So everything that I shared here today was very, very general. But when we're talking to an airline, they'll be very, very detailed and very specific on what they're actually looking for, because they'll ask us, like, hey, we need an airplane to do X, Y, and Z. And so we then will say, okay, well, our airplane can do X, Y, and Z better than the competitor's airplane because of these other reasons. And so that's how we'll usually go about making our airplane be the best airplane for that airline.
Thank you. I think that's answered the question. Hopefully the student that asked the question last week
Yeah, that's
our answer.
two student.
Great.
Okay, there's a two student already, Rob, waiting for ask you a question.
Okay.
I'll give a opportunity first for Andi Dwi. You can like unmute yourself and ask the question.
Thank you, sir. Hello, sir. Before I want to say thank you for this opportunity you been given to me. Okay, let me introduce myself first. My name is Anita from Aviation Polytechnic. Okay, my question is, how is Boeing addressing global regulatory and safety challenge in developing autonomous technologies for future commercial aircraft, and how will they ensure the integration of these technologies not only improves efficiency but also flight safety and reliability?
Sorry, can you repeat the first part of the question? There was somebody else talking. I couldn't really hear you.
Can you repeat the question, Andi Dwi? Because like sebelumnya ada suara bocor.
My question is, how is Boeing addressing global regulatory and safety challenge in developing autonomous technologies for future commercial aircraft, and how will they ensure the integration of these technologies not only improve efficiency but also flight safety and reliability? Thank you.
Yes, great question. So one of the biggest aspects of being a Boeing manufacturer, or sorry, an airplane manufacturer, is dealing with and working with global regulators. So us in the United States, we deal with the Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA. We also deal a lot with the European regulator, EASA, and Transport Canada, CAAC over in China, JCAB in Japan. Every country or region has their own regulator, and we have to work hand in hand with them to make sure our technology that we put into our airplanes is efficient and good and quality for those airline operations. So the FAA, or basically every regulator, has to then sign off or certify our airplane and all of the associated technology. And that is probably one of the most challenging things about airplane production that we face as a manufacturer. I'll give an example. There's a company called Mitsubishi that in Japan that built an airplane called the Space Jet. And sadly, they weren't able to get through certification, and they never ended up coming into market because certification now can be very, very challenging. It's knowing the ins and outs of what the regulator is looking for and what they expect and what they will actually sign off on. And so it is a constant back and forth with us and the regulator, making sure we are all in agreement, all in compliance, and making sure all of our airplanes and then the technology and all of the things that we put in them are going to be effective and have the highest quality, and make sure that they are able to be certified. So none of our airplanes would ever fly anywhere if they are not certified by the regulator, and that is something that we work with them on.
Okay, is that answer your question, Andi Dwi?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for your
Okay.
answer.
Okay, for next question is Muhammad Agung. You can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Farrazi. Hello, Mr. Rob Dangerfield and Mrs. Veronica Andrews. I have a question from previous meeting, but sorry for that, but my question is still the same. I'm really curious about how Boeing managed to reduce fuel consumption and promoting environmental friendly aircraft. So how Boeing have plans to integrate electrified aircraft propulsion into its long-term market forecast? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So just make sure I heard you right. You're talking about the environmental sustainable aspect of our airplanes?
Yes.
Okay. So our plan for sustainability is one that we're very, very committed to. And I'll give one example of one of the commitments that we have for sustainable aviation, which is sustainable aviation fuel. Now, if you haven't heard of that, that's basically it's a jet plane version of biofuel, so made from sustainable sources instead of fossil fuels or petroleum. And right now, all of our Boeing airplanes can fly on a blend of sustainable aviation fuel. And by 2030, every single airplane of ours, no matter how old or how new, will be able to fly on 100% biofuel or sustainable aviation fuel. That's our easiest solution, our short-term solution to having a lesser environmental impact. Our longer-term solutions, when we talk about next decade, next 20 years, we have an advent of other technologies. If you've heard of the company called Whisk, that is something that Boeing has invested heavily in. It's our battery electric powered autonomous vehicle, more like an air taxi that will have a vertical takeoff and landing. That is a technology that we're very much investing in. We've looked at other means of energy like hydrogen and then other battery technologies to lift our other new future concepts. We've talked about hydrogen fuel cells. We are exploring every avenue to help decarbonize aviation. It is not an easy task, and it's not going to come just from us. But we have a partnership worldwide of airlines, of manufacturers, of oil producers like SAF or sustainable aviation fuels that will all combine to help lessen the climate impact of aviation. And so we're doing the most that we can. And every year, I think I showed the slide of the eco demonstrator airplane. We're constantly looking for new ways to help and build, and that will just be more sustainable overall. Even our factories, when we are producing more jets, a lot of them are now running on renewable energy, especially renewable electricity. So even when we produce our planes, we're looking for ways we can reduce our environmental impact. So it's a multi-pronged approach that we're going for in that.
How is it, Agung? Do you have any more following question?
No, sir. Clear. Thank you.
Yeah, that is a really interested question before of for the sustainability aircraft.
Right.
While waiting for another question, I just curious, could you give us a hint, did the Boeing in the developing of some a sustainable aircraft with the just say a more electric engine or something like that, beside a 777X, nearly in the future?
Yeah. So the one that's flying right now is the small Whisk little air taxi. Essentially, that's already flying. It's being tested. When we start talking about really large airplanes like the 777 or even like the 737, it is very, very difficult to have a battery operated airplane because batteries are very heavy and they're not very energy dense. So for for every pound of battery versus a pound of kerosene fuel, the energy is so vastly more in the kerosene than they are in the battery. And so we need battery technology to advance a very, very far distance to start thinking about putting them in very large transport category airplanes like the 777 or 737. So from a battery standpoint, it's working great for cars right now because cars don't have to deal with the weight as much, but batteries are just extremely heavy and not very energy dense. And so they aren't quite as applicable yet in airplanes. Now, we still are thinking about concepts about how do we utilize maybe future battery technology and how do we utilize future concepts like hydrogen. Is there a way that we can take other energy sources besides jet fuel and fossil fuels to incorporate that. So yeah, we are always looking at new technology for that. But when it comes to just battery electric, it's just unfortunately very, very difficult to do with the current battery technology that's available.
Okay. My following question is about like the family of the aircraft. I know like now there is a two big company of like a large body aircraft, which is like a Boeing and Airbus. Uh into my curious to what extent did you share the research or something like research or everything to develop the new kind of aircraft to improve the sustainability or something like that? Or did the two big company just develop it by itself and keep their like a secret for themselves? Or did you have sharing knowledge at a certain degree?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in normal airplane production, we usually don't share a lot of technology with our biggest competitor. I will tell you something interesting though. Back in the mid 1990s, we actually did a study with Airbus on how to create like a very large airplane, like a super giant airplane, and what that might be like. So we actually did do some collaboration with them way back then, but that's not as prevalent now. And I also will say that with sustainability, a lot of that technology is shared because we want everyone to be successful with it. And so we have so many partners that we work with, whether it be Whisk, whether it be producers of sustainable aviation fuel, whether it be airlines that have partnerships. We do share a lot of that kind of stuff because we want everyone to be successful. Because with sustainability, it's not going to be just Boeing or just one airline or just one factory. It's everybody together. So while we may not share like directly like patents and everything like that, but we will try to partner with as many different components as we can to make sure that we can all go in this together and be successful.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Really answer my curious. There is a one person asking a question again. Abid, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Smitar, Miss. My name is Cadet Abid Anugrasis from course Aircraft Maintenance Engineering Batch 4. My question, what are the main challenges faced by the Boeing company in terms of marketing?
Yeah, that's a
Thank you,
great
sir.
question. I'll
Thank you.
tell you, no problem. Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll be honest, the biggest challenge is Airbus, is our main competitor, because we know that they're in every single campaign, selling campaign. When we're going to an airline that wants a new airplane, we know that Airbus is on the other side, also trying to sell them their product. And Airbus, like I said, I can acknowledge that they do build a very competitive product. And so there's this very fierce competition between us and Airbus. And I'd say that is by far the most challenging aspect. I'll even go one step further. It's even more challenging when we go to an airline that only operates an Airbus airplane, that only operates like a different airplane, and doesn't operate any Boeing airplanes at all. That can be also very challenging. So I'd say a mix of both those two. But yeah, that's part of why we do really say we do like the competition. We want competition makes everyone better, and we do welcome it, and we continually go back and forth on driving new innovations through competition.
Okay. Abid, does that answer your question? Or do you have any following question? And for the others, if you are too shy to speak the question, you can also write the question in the chat
Yes,
box
sir.
or something like that.
Yes, sir. The next question, what are the advantages of Boeing and Airbus?
Sorry, you cut out on that question a little bit. Can you repeat it, please?
Bisa diulang pertanyaannya ya. Nothing is cutting off, Rob. Yeah.
Okay. All right, sorry.
Yeah, Pak Rasi, last
Yeah.
week,
Yeah.
another question and has
Okay.
not been answered. So the question was, I remember, how does Boeing face the third competitor? Is China for the next 10 years? Because we know China is coming soon, right? So what
Yes.
you thought, Rob? Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question and one I think about all the time. So China, with its Comac company building what they call the C919, that is an airplane that is very similar in size to the 737 and the A320. It's their single aisle. And China, to give them credit, like they've never built an airplane that big before. So I mean, that is a feat that I can very much respect. And I think we definitely welcome the competition, absolutely, because competition makes everyone better. And while they're not nearly to scale to the point of Boeing or Airbus, they do have that ability. And I think that we are watching it very closely, and that, like you said, the next decade, the sky, I really think the sky's the limit for them, and that they can come up to speed relatively quickly. Now, their barriers to entry commercial aircraft manufacturing are very, very high, but they've demonstrated now that they have designed and built their own airplane, which is very, very difficult to do. And so they will be likely a formidable competitor in the next 10 to 20 years. And so that is something that it's going to force us to innovate further to take on additional competition. Now, it's interesting because this wasn't always a duopoly with just Boeing and Airbus. Back in the 1900s, 1950s even, there were like a bunch of other airplane manufacturers, from Douglas, from Lockheed Martin, like in the U.S. even. And then there's other manufacturers in Britain and in France. And like there were a lot more players in the market, and now it's just been reduced all the way to Boeing and Airbus. So the fact that it could expand again, I think it's not a bad thing. I think it's just going to go to show how there's going to be always good competition in this field.
Thank you.
Rob, I would like to ask you one question again, for the urban air mobility,
Yeah.
I see several reference that there is some development from the Boeing, like a Whisk company or something like that. Did the Boeing make the Whisk company to focus on the urban air mobility, or is there any something developed right now to come up with it?
Yeah, so we didn't create Whisk, the company. They kind of started on their own. We were just an early investor into Whisk, and if I recall correctly, we now own them outright. I'm pretty sure we do. I'm actually not. I'm pretty sure we actually own them now, but regardless, we made a significant investment in them. So they didn't start under Boeing, but we saw their potential in the urban air mobility market because they're one of the few that's fully autonomous, which means you don't have to have an actual pilot. It will take you from point A to point B fully automatically. You don't have to do anything. And so we saw the potential of that technology. So we wanted to invest early on, and we saw the market potential for that. And now, as you can see, there are many, many different startups in the urban air mobility space. And so Whisk is a way that Boeing is kind of future-proofing our own production and our own future with that tech.
Okay, so if it is like that, like I mean, will the Boeing like take an investment into the other companies such as like a Joby or something like that, or Boeing only will like be focused on the Whisk itself because I think it's already owned, right? You tell me before.
Yeah. So Whisk is definitely a priority. That's not to say we'll never invest in any other tech, like we very well could. But I'd say for now, for the near term, like we're going to focus on Whisk. But there could certainly come a time when we want to invest in others for sure. Like we're always looking out. We have a whole investment arm of the company that looks at new technologies and where to invest in next. So there could come a time when we invest in others, but I'd say for the short term on the urban air mobility market, it would be Whisk. We're going to focus on.
Okay. I will give the others opportunity as well. Is there any question from Api Banyuwangi or Politeknik Penerbangan Makassar? You can ask a question in Bahasa or in English, up to you. Just like I think this is the last question from me, Rob. Like I thought like this is like I always ask
That
a
was great.
question like sorry for that.
No, that's all
Like
great. Love it.
you talk about the history development of the aircraft product in the Boeing. Which one like has already being like a stop for the supporting or something like that. Like a 727, 737, like will you do like a still supporting for the aircraft itself if it is still using by any other company? Because I know like some airline is on right now not only buying a new aircraft, but sometimes they buy like a used aircraft with a certain capabilities or something like that. At a certain degree, you will like Boeing will still support it, or is there any like a ex expired year for
Yeah. And
the supporting itself?
yeah, that's a good question. And I would say when you buy a brand new airplane, you get a certain level of support from the Boeing company, and that will dissipate over time if you don't continually buy new Boeing airplanes. But I'd say in general, you're going to fight for like spare parts or post-delivery services or any kind of maintenance stuff. You could still find some Boeing level of support for, especially for those older airplanes like are no longer produced, like the 747, the 757, the 727. There's not many 27s left around, but I mean, you could still find some support. Now, it's not going to be nearly as much as you would get from buying a brand new airplane, but Boeing will always try our best to help customers that have Boeing products, regardless of where we got from. Now, we definitely will support the airlines customers that purchase from us directly the most. Like we give them by far the most support. But we recognize that airlines will operate a lot of older airplanes. For example, like Delta Airlines operates a large Boeing fleet on some of those airplanes that they operate, like the passenger 767 and the 757. They are not produced anymore, but we still, they're still our customer, and we still want to help them as much as we can.
Okay, thank you. That's answer my question. Thank you. There is one question I think before from the Agung. Yeah, Agung, you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
Thank you, Mr. Forozi. I have a question for Mr. Rob Dangerfield and Mrs. Veronica Andrews. I'm asking as a candidate aircraft technician, is there any chance for fresh graduate to work in Boeing? Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat that? You cut out a little bit.
Rob, he asked a question he asked really direct question is there any chance for the graduate from the Polytechnic Penerbangan Makassar or API Banyuwangi can work in Boeing or something like that? I think you and Miss
Yeah.
Veronica can answer
Pretty short
it.
answer. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, absolutely 100%. We recruit from all over the world. We exist all over the world. Like, we have locations everywhere. And depending on what you want to do, we have so many different options of what to do, whether it's engineering, whether it's machining, whether it's a mechanic, whether it's a pilot, whether it's finance, whether it's sales and marketing, what I do. There are a wide array of jobs. We employ over 160,000 people around the world. And so there is definitely a spot for everyone, that anyone that wants to come be a part of the Boeing company, there's absolutely a case to be made and a way you can get here for sure. I encourage anyone who wants to, after they finish their schooling, wants to come work for Boeing, absolutely apply. Like, we want all the best and brightest, just like I'm talking to here.
Yeah, totally agree with Rob. Just go ahead, apply. We actually accept from any university. So there's a big chance you guys if you guys would like really to work at Boeing, just go to Boeing.com careers, and you will see the opportunity, the job opening that list there, and go ahead. And we have Boeing Indonesia, and I will maybe send you guys what's opening in Indonesia, so you can try. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs.
Thank you, Miss Veronica and Mr. Rob. I think I give one last question for the cadet if you still have a question. If there is no question, I will conclude everything. Thank you, Rob, for a really interesting presentation from you. This is giving us a lot of information about from the history of the Boeing company and development of the aircraft product since 1916, which is a 707 jet engine is the first jet aircraft that has been developed, and it is literally from Boeing itself. And you talk also about the family of the aircraft from the 373 which has the single aisle, and 787 with the double aisle which is a powerful root opener, and the last is a 777X with the newest engine a GA9X. This is a really a new opening a new horizon, and a good opportunity to open connecting the world. Sorry, Rob, I stop it. There is one
Yeah,
last
sure.
question from
Yeah, go ahead.
Dewa Gede. Okay, I will give you a chance to ask a question. So can you please unmute yourself and ask the question?
Okay, thank you. My question is, how does the Boeing test market competing with Airbus? Because in report in 2024, Boeing control 40% of the market, and the Airbus just for Airbus 60%.
Oh, you're talking about market share between Boeing and Airbus?
Yes.
Yeah, so depending on the type of airplane, whether it's the twin aisle or the single aisle, you're going to see a difference. So in the twin aisle space, if you think of the 787 and 777X, Boeing has a bit more market share than Airbus in that category. But in the single aisle space, but like the 737 and the A320, then Airbus has a lead in market share there. So we both have more than the other in the other segment, if that makes sense. So, but the nature of a duopoly is that there are only two major players. Now, we could have a third come rising up with Comac, or even if Embraer starts to get in the game, or Irkut, or any of these other players. But for right now, so Boeing, and talk about freighter market share, as you saw, is very dominated by Boeing. So Boeing leads the market share in the twin aisle space and the freighter space, where Airbus leads the market share in the single aisle space.
Yeah. Okay. Is that okay? Is that all right, Dewa Gede?
Okay, thank you for the answer. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Rob, for the talk. And to conclude, yeah, like, could you give us like a couple of statement to give like a closing statement
Sure.
for us?
So, yes, absolutely. So, first of all, thank you so much for hosting me. This has been really, really great. I, of course, just love talking about aviation and airplanes overall. That's why I love being in marketing, because that's literally my job, is to go talk about these airplanes. And so I'm very, very thankful to be able to talk to you all, and hopefully maybe even inspired some of you to come join Boeing someday. Aviation is truly the greatest industry to ever work in. I'm a bit biased, but that's what I truly believe. And maybe next time you do fly in a plane, you can think of it if it's a Boeing or not. And you can remember, like, oh yeah, they operate a lot of really cool things. We build a lot of really cool things. We design a lot of really cool things. And I hope in your studies at this university, you can really see those for the amazing machines that they are. So again, thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here with you.
Thank you, Rob. Like, also I have like a little statement for that. Like, there is a common word in Indonesia, and also it is maybe in the world, like, if it is not Boeing, we are not going. So we hope like the best for like
Yes.
Boeing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
To go for development. I hope, I also like hope really soon I can like experience flying with the 777 X with the GN9X. Yeah, it would be
Absolutely.
like a really nice experience. Okay,
Totally
thank you
agree.
very much for your talk. Thank you also, Miss Veronica,
You're welcome.
coming here, and also for the other cadets, don't forget to fulfill your presentation. I think it is on the chat box, so you could you can just like yeah, click the link for the attendance. And also I have some information for the next session. Next session, it will be on next week, June 19, 2024, at the same time, with Miss Veronica as a speaker, with the topic Real World Corporate Communication. So thank you everyone. That's conclude everything from me, Farul Razi, saying thank you and then Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Pak Rasi.